What is the problem with Christianity? There's this problem in Christianity that is false, and that is the video that we're going to be debunking and reacting to in this video. It says the problem with Christianity explained simply. Put your big boy pants on, because we're about to dive straight into heresy land. Aaron Cortez, Orthodox Christian. Let's dive straight into this video.
If someone today claimed a man walked on water, rose from the dead, and fed thousands with a few pieces of food, you wouldn't call it history. You'd call it a story.
False equivalency already. So we're off to a good start.
So the real question is simple. Why does the same claim suddenly become truth just
Few things. Gosh, this is where we're starting with this low tier explanation. Okay, well, obviously it's not gonna be history yet, because it's freaking simply it's happening right now. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing, it will be a story. 100% it'll be a story, but we have to also be like, okay, well, what is the evidence for this? Back in the day, we didn't freaking have telephones, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have camcorders, we didn't have any of that. We didn't have the internet. So what did we do? We had letters sent. We had eyewitnesses. Those eyewitnesses were stoned to death. It's very, very rare that you would die for a lie, let alone multiple people dying for a lie, like multiple. It's also very, very rare to see multiple psychosis, like a mass psychosis or a mass kind of like drug use, which is very, very rare and has been debunked by numerous scholars. And multiple archaeologists have found P52, which is literally the oldest fragment of the Gospel of John, and dates what, fifth cent? No, not fifth century. 50 something AD, I think, something along those lines. It's the oldest manuscript of the Gospel of John. So a gospel, literally an eyewitness testimony, has been dated around the time of Jesus. So it's like pretty sure he existed.
because it's old? Let's start with something uncomfortable. The entire case for Jesus' existence relies heavily on texts written decades after he supposedly lived.
Oh my, is this the type of low IQ argumentation we're about to go with? That Jesus didn't even exist? I would have had more faith if the video was like, sure, Jesus existed, but maybe he was just a prophet, the Jesus dilemma, which is like, who is he? Was he really God? And things like that. But if your entire claim is like, Jesus didn't even exist, like you, like you lose all credibility right out the gate.
Not days, not weeks, decades. The New Testament wasn't written by eyewitnesses sitting down immediately after events. It was written later by unknown authors based on stories that had already been circulating. Now think about how stories change. Play the telephone game once, and the message gets distorted within minutes. Now stretch that across 30 to 70 years, across different regions, languages, and cultures. Are we really supposed to believe the story stayed perfectly accurate? Even in modern times, with cameras everywhere, people disagree on what happened in a single event just hours later.
Not true. Okay, so this is when you know that you have no idea what the hell you're talking about, and you have no idea how the Gospels were written. Okay, Mark was written approximately 30 years, I think, after the death of Jesus, around 60 AD, and you would know how the Gospels were written. Okay, because it's not like 30 years after the death of Jesus, nothing happened. These stories kept piling up. People kept telling the stories. It's like the entire narrative is still there. The 12 still existed. Like the 12 still existed. Like they were still there. They could have been like, oh, no, that didn't happen. This didn't happen. Oh, wait, did you remember this? Like everybody's been talking about this for 30 years. And then when Mark finally wrote it down, he was able to be like, oh, yeah, I remember that. I remember that. I remember that. I remember that. And if you're just like, there are pieces missing, well, that's because the Gospels were written for the church. The church who have been talked about in Jesus, who the church has been preaching Jesus and preached into Jesus, meaning Jesus was preached into the church for 30 years. So of course, when I write you a letter, your brain with the filled in context already for the past 30 years can be like, okay, I can fill in the gaps. That's why the church is important.
Court cases fall apart because eyewitnesses contradict each other, and yet we're expected to treat ancient secondhand accounts as reliable. That's the first crack.
That's not, oh my goodness. I'm going to have to be pausing and stopping for like a good while, okay? I don't know how much of this video we're going to have to get, but like this is dumb. This is dumb, okay? The Gospels don't contradict each other. They overlap, meaning if there are two eyewitnesses to a car crash, I tell you this. This is what I tell you. The car stopped at a halt, at a screeching halt, and I hear a boom. I didn't see anything else. That's all I heard. Another eyewitness tells you, I hear a car screeching, and then I hear a scream, ah, and a kid fell. Are those two contradicting eyewitness testimonies? No. Those are corroborating stories. That's different from a contradiction.
Now, look at the fact that there are no contemporary records of Jesus from people who actually lived during his supposed lifetime. No Roman records, no official documents, no inscriptions, nothing from historians writing at that exact time. This is strange. The Romans documented everything: executions, rebellions, political threats, especially those involving crowds. And according to the story, Jesus wasn't just some quiet preacher. He was performing public miracles, gathering followers, causing disturbances, and eventually being executed. That's exactly the kind of figure the Romans paid attention to.
I love how he just brushes over the fact that Tacitus did exist. The Annals by Tacitus had Jesus in it. And there's no written records of like eyewitness testimonies that supposedly lived in his time. The Gospels existed. The Gospels were written. Josephus wrote about Jesus. This is so dumb.
Yet silence. Compare that to other historical figures. Even minor Roman officials left behind records. Governors, tax collectors, local rulers, we know about them because they appear in multiple independent sources. But Jesus, the central figure of the world's largest religion, leaves no direct trace during his own lifetime. That's not proof he...
Neither did... We know Plato existed because of manuscripts that dates hundreds of years after Plato. You're all of a sudden going to deny Plato's existence because of your if we're using your criteria, Plato we shouldn't believe Plato existed. Neither did Aesop, neither did Socrates, neither did Aristotle. If you're losing your I'm losing brain cells.
He didn't exist. But it's a serious problem for the level of certainty people claim. Now, let's move to the Gospels themselves: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are often presented as independent confirmations. But when you actually read them side by side, something becomes obvious. They don't agree. They contradict each other on basic details. Who visited the tomb? What did they see? When did events happen? Even the last words of Jesus are different depending on which gospel you read. If 4 people witness the same event and give completely different accounts, what do we normally conclude? That something...
This is so low IQ. Okay, first. He just asks questions. He doesn't actually give evidence in terms of what this video is. Okay, he's just like, oh well, they contradict each other. Okay, proceeds to not give a verse. Proceeds to just assert things, and just not have any conclusion. It's so dumb. Okay, if I tell you, somebody's last words were like this sentence long. Like this sentence were his last words. His last words were, "I'm sorry, Mom." And then another person tells you his last words were about his last words was about his family. And another person goes, his last words was about his loved one. Are those all contradictory? Do those contradict each other? That's exactly
thing is off. And this isn't a small issue. These aren't...
I'm actually getting pissed because this is so low tier. This has 23,000 views, and this was posted 2 weeks ago. This is dumb. Okay, this needs more dislikes.
Minor differences like the sky was blue versus the sky was cloudy. These are core narrative contradictions. Now
Like
imagine
what?
a modern example.
No. You're not just gonna breeze past that as if we just forgot. You make a claim, present the evidence. He's not gonna give any because his claim has no substantial evidence to back up said claim.
Journalists report on the same major event. One says it happened in the morning. Another says evening. One says 3 people were there.
One says the 3rd hour, I believe. No, one says the 6th hour, one says the 9th or something. It's like there's a difference in hours. Those are still corroborative because it depends on when the story plot line is being written in. Like, for example, if I tell you that it is like March 8th, 2026, whatever, whatnot, at 3 p.m. this happened. And then I tell you on March 8th, 2026 at, I don't know, at 6 p.m., that same thing that happened at 3 p.m. happened, but they happened simultaneously. I am right simply because the 3 p.m. was Eastern time and the 6 p.m. was something 3 p.m. Or maybe the 3 p.m. was Los Angeles time and the 6 p.m. is New York time. Happen simultaneously. It just depends on when the point of story is, the point of time.
There. Another says 10. One says the main person died instantly. Another says they spoke for hours before dying. Would you trust that as reliable reporting? Of course not. But when it comes to religious texts, people suddenly lower the standard. Now consider another angle. Many of the stories about Jesus match patterns found in earlier religions. Miraculous births, divine sons, death and resurrection. These ideas didn't start with Christianity. They existed long before. Take Horus from Egyptian mythology, or Mithras.
Oh, shoot me in the foot. Shoot me in the foot. People have existed for a long time. Are there going to be overlapping stories in a lot of these? Yes. Even Solomon has said it. Nothing is new under the sun. Okay? Even Jordan Peterson talks about this. It's the idea of an archetype. You're gonna see a lot of these things in cultures. You're gonna see it. You'll see a lot of it. Okay? Now, just because something is similar to one another does not negate the validity of either one. Let me say that again. Just because one imitates or has similarities with another doesn't negate the validity of either or. Proceeding.
Or even elements
That's called a fallacy, by the way.
in Hindu traditions involving divine incarnations, different cultures, different times, similar story patterns. This raises a question. Are these stories recording real events? Or are they repeating familiar myth structures that people already believed? Humans don't create stories in a vacuum. We recycle ideas. We adapt what already exists. Even today,
Is the actual no, okay. So this is actually super low tier to the point where they're even denying the existence of Jesus. Okay, saying things like, because these stories have been repeated over and over again, which is to know which is real, which is a fallacy. Because just because something copies another doesn't negate the validity of another. Like just because, just because, just because you see a similarity in a fable for a historical event doesn't negate the historical event. It just says that, oh, these two are similar. Like this is actually so dumb. I'm actually losing brain cells. I don't know how much of this I can take.
movies reuse the same hero narrative again and again. The chosen one, the sacrifice, the resurrection. It works because people already connect with it. So, when early Christians were spreading their message in a world full of existing religious ideas, it wouldn't be surprising if their story followed a familiar template. That doesn't prove Jesus didn't exist.
So it does prove that Jesus existed. Because it doesn't prove that Jesus didn't exist. So it does prove that Jesus existed. What are we talking about? You just made a double negative.
But it weakens the idea that his story is unique or
It's like we keep moving the goalposts.
historically grounded. Now let's talk about authorship. The Gospels are traditionally attributed to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But modern scholarship agrees these names were added later. The original text
No. 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 Matthew, the book of Matthew, I believe, was kept by the see of, it was either Alexandria or Antioch. So of course, if the see was just like, yeah, this was for Matthew, we kept it. Like we knew who it was for. Why would we have to name it when we knew who it was for? And also, you have to also keep in mind that Christians were being persecuted. So to name a specific gospel and attribute it to an apostle of Jesus that lived with Jesus, you about to get killed. So obviously we have to take these things into consideration as well. That thanks be to God for the diocese or the see. I don't know if it was Antioch or Alexandria that kept the Gospel of Matthew, but thanks be to God for these churches that kept the faith. But like, this is just so low tier. The original texts were anonymous, obviously, because one, if I knew who I was addressing these things to, why would I name myself? Like, I know who it was for. Like, it's like sending a text. I send a text. I already know who it's for. I'm not gonna write Aaron on every single text because I know who it's gonna be directed to, and the people who it's directed to already know that it's coming from me. And also, again, Christians were persecuted, so to name yourself is like gonna be very, very bad.
Texts were anonymous. Think about that. The most important documents in Christianity, written by unknown people. If someone today handed you a biography of a miracle worker with no author, no clear source, and written decades after the events, would you accept it as history?
I would already know it because I would know a few things. You're taking this as out of vacuum as if they're two the same thing. This is why I keep saying false equivalency. If I was given that and I was at that time, I would already know a few things. I would already know that Jesus existed. I would already know about the massive scandal about the crucifixion. I would already know about the resurrection because, again, now granted, I'm presupposing that the resurrection was true, but we're going by historical evidence and the fact that a lot of people did die for the resurrection and the confession of the resurrection and the confession of the crucifixion. So by that logic, I'm going there, right? If I were to put myself in that situation, I would already know Jesus Christ. I would already know at least stories about resurrection and the crucifixion, and I would know so many things. I would know so many things to the point where it would fill the hole. Now I'm not gonna believe it point blank period, but I would be leaning towards believing it because I have so many stories. Now, does this automatically be like, okay, Jesus is valid? No. But it negates the entire example that he's giving as if it's a false equivalency or as if it is a correct equivalency when it's a false equivalency because he's comparing my position now at a vacuum versus thousands of years ago. If I was handed the gospel, which had no original name, if I was handed the original gospel with no name and no date, well, obviously I would know the date because I'm in that position. Like, I would know, like I would be in the church. Okay, I'm gonna go through one more point, but I am like losing brain cells genuinely.
History. Or would you ask questions?
I
And
would
it gets
ask
more
questions.
interesting. Mark,
If it's-
believed to be the earliest gospel, doesn't even mention key details that later become central, like the virgin birth. That appears later in Matthew and Luke. So,
What does that have to do with anything? The story does not evolve. I just
the story evolves, it grows, new elements are added over time. That's exactly how legends develop. Start simple, add details, increase the drama, strengthen the message. You can see the same pattern in modern rumors. A small incident happens. Within days, it becomes exaggerated. Within weeks, it becomes something completely different. Now stretch that across decades with no central authority controlling the narrative. You don't get reliable history. You get mythology in progress. And here's
we're gonna hear. This dude has absolutely no idea what the hell he's talking about, especially with the development of the canon. If you have a question on how the Bible was formed, how the Gospels were written, how the canonization of the Bible was formed, I highly suggest the canon. The canon conundrum. It's by which one is the freaking one I read? It's called The Biblical Canon by Lee McDonald. This is a very, very coherent and cohesive book. I highly, highly recommend you read that and not listen to this garbage. Yeah, I am going to end this video here so that I can regain the brain cells that I lost watching this video. Aaron Cortez, Orthodox Christian. I'll see you in the next video. Subscribe. Always remember Jesus loves you.